Welcome back to my art channel. I'm Evelyn and I've been enjoying the late spring days here in Korea with lots of outdoor sketching, but I've also been trying to recharge and focus on what's really important to me. Have you ever felt torn into too many different directions with your art? That was my experience in the last few months, and in this art vlog I take a moment to look back, maybe untangle some of that creative web, and ground myself with my sketchbook and new paintings. Looking back, I can feel where that shift happened from busy to chaotic. It was after I'd finished my last personal painting, an illustration of Luvian, for which I really gave my all, and the art market season here really started going. Before that, I'd attended events like the Jeju book fair and smaller markets occasionally, but they weren't taking up much of my time overall. But then the weather took a corner into that perfect pre-summer mood and I threw myself into attending as many fairs, events and markets as I could. I may have bitten off more than I could chew. While they're fun to attend and I love when my little prints and scenes find new eyes and homes, 2 to sometimes even 3 events per week just left me with no time to sit down, to calm my thoughts and just focus on actually painting, as I was constantly repackaging and preparing and organizing for the next market. I recently wrapped up May by packaging my Patreon prints, and that's always a nice, calmer moment to reflect. What did I draw? What am I working on or excited to start? And how can I make myself focus on 1 or 2, maybe 3 areas, instead of scrambling to do too many things? What would be your priorities if you could choose? Forget about obligations or work, but if you had the freedom to pursue any project you wanted, what would it be? Could you narrow it down, or would you, like me, spread yourself too thin into too many directions? I've always been the type to have multiple interests, no proper art niche. And while I think that narrowing it down too much can limit us, I do want to be more conscious of my goals and the projects I love most. So let's say 3 areas, because that's always a neat, simple number, isn't it? One thing I always want to continue is sketching. Travel sketching, but travel mostly meaning anything from actual trips to the view from our window or the cafe 5 minutes away. I love learning more about sketching from observation, and it is an outlet for me, a way to test new materials and techniques, but also I know from past experience that just staying home all the time, silent and alone, is not great for my mental health, even if I enjoy my quiet painting days. Sketching on the go, while hiking or meeting friends or on my own, has been very enriching. So that's something I want to pursue more in the second half of the year for sure. Often, my sketches for these on-the-go art sessions are very simple or messy or honestly a bit uninspired. I just want to capture a moment, like one would set up an old-fashioned camera in the past to take a single snapshot. On a very short hike, the flickering sunlight caught my attention, and I try to capture that constant movement in my sketch, for example. For a quick sketch at the book cafe, on the other hand, I challenged myself to observe and paint what I see, even if that meant muted colors, messy shadows, and a quite boring composition. I was using a CMYK gouache palette. Cyan, magenta, yellow, black, plus a white for mixing. And it's a color combination that turns all my sketches into very soft, delicate paintings. I want to explore that more for sure. By the way, if you ever visit Jeju Island, there are so many book cafes here. You can read a book from their shelves, buy some from their collection, enjoy the quiet, and lately I've seen a lot of books that invite the reader to add their own thoughts, short poems or prose, or a simple message to whoever opens it next. My friends were reading and writing while I was sketching, so that felt very relaxing. But since this cafe closes quite early, I didn't end up finishing that sketch as much as I wanted to. It feels weird to even say this, but I think I'm close to the end of this sketchbook. I'm not sure when I actually bought it. I think it might have been 5 years ago as a travel sketchbook. But guess what? For a while, travel was very much impossible. I dug it back out last year when I was traveling back and forth to Seoul a lot. I'll do a proper sketchbook tour once it's truly finished. There are still some old pages from the very beginning that I have painted over with gesso and want to see what I can do there. So it's this really rough surface that I want to use with acrylics or gouache. As you can see, I've also gone backwards through this sketchbook and sketched on the back of pages. The paper quality at this point isn't great. It went through quite a few humid seasons here in Korea. Was often outdoors, and I feel like the absorbency of the paper has gone way down, so I nowadays enjoy it more with gouache than with pure watercolors. This is the most recent sketch, a really quick view of a book cafe I went to capture some of the stone wall just outside and the bamboo and grass behind it, and a bit of my coffee here. I am really stingy when it comes to art materials. I'm always worried I'll use them up too quickly, and so I often water down my gouache, for example, just naturally. That's just what I feel like. Here I had a CMYK type of palette with me, plus white, and for once I actually used them fresh out of the tube instead of reactivating dry paint. That requires a bit more preparation, of course. I have to travel with the paint tubes, I have to have space where I can balance my little palette without it falling off. So that particular cafe was perfect for it, but I'm not sure how well I could do this in other places. Maybe I'll just have to become more experienced using all of these tools. And I really enjoyed the more painterly approach, the heavier paint layers I could get out of this. Towards the end I used it pretty much fresh out of the tube, the white just mixed with a little bit of yellow or the cyan. A little reminder that maybe my art materials aren't as precious as I sometimes tell myself, and I can just use them up and get new ones, because honestly a paint tube will still take me multiple years first to properly empty out. Here I was using the Neocolor 2, which can then be reactivated with water, and I really like how that quickly can add a punch of color to a watercolor sketch, especially if you're in a hurry and your sketches turn out just a bit like light, blurry images because you don't have time to sharpen everything, to build up contrast and layers. I found having just 2 shades of those really intense neocolors with me was really pleasant and interesting to work with. They also created fun root textures and these like hanging branches and vines that grow around the trees. Sometimes different textures we encounter in nature can fit different art materials. For that particular day, these granulating watercolors and the Neocolor 2 together felt quite fitting. And this was a fun little experiment. Some movie scenes, and it's literally just one of these elementary school age appropriate, super cheap ballpoint pens with multiple colored options. I didn't know that these nowadays come in so many different colors. This Talent sketchbook took over in my mind from the Arche travel sketchbook that I have. They fit everywhere I go, only that this isn't really made for watercolors, but instead takes pretty much every other medium really well so far that I've tried, like colored pencils, different sanguine and charcoal leads. The pen here. Next I want to give it a try with markers and gouache, and especially the gouache with as little water as possible because this again isn't really made for that. I think because this is nearly done and because it's kind of expensive and it's like fancy Arche hot press watercolor paper, I never really reach for it for just mindless little doodles, while this is perfect for that. This has this eggshell cream paper color that I like to draw on, but can be a bit of a pain when scanning and preparing files for printing. There's not one perfect sketchbook in this world, at least I haven't found it yet, and I like to have different options to play around with in different media, or depending on the mood I'm in or the place I'm sketching at. The last kind of sketch is what I call my hands need to be busy sketches. These usually happen while hanging out somewhere, waiting for an appointment, or even when an art market turns out quieter than usual. They more often than not have nothing to do with my surroundings, as I either doodle whatever comes to mind or draw studies. Maybe it's just my ADHD, but I sure hate not having a pencil or something in my hand. And lately I've been embracing that, because the alternative is me reaching for my phone, which I'm trying to do less and less. I'd actually set that as a goal sometime during May, and it's been going really well. Keep small notebooks and tiny sketchbooks around, in my bag and at my desk, and try to train myself to always reach for those first in the empty-minded moments when I'd instead scroll social media. Just doodling mostly, but it's been a nice phone detox in a way. When I come home, though, I just want to paint or draw. And the more elaborate, the better. What might look like paper right now is actually just pre-cut linen canvas. And the reason I went for this is that my kind of location being here in Korea and not on the Korean mainland, if I want to try any kind of canvas, I would have to import it, buy an entire large roll of it. That can be very expensive, and it leaves me with a lot of painting surface that I haven't had a chance to even try out before I get it. On the other hand, local art shops have pre-stretched canvas. Most of it is cotton canvas. There's the occasional linen canvas, just a lot of rough to medium cotton. I'd heard a lot of good things about this one, as it is a linen canvas with very fine texture. And what I do with these, while you could just directly paint on them, what I actually do is mount them to MDF or wooden panels. While I love soft watercolors and bright pastel hues when travel sketching, this is when my flair for the dramatic comes out, for storytelling, for fantasy, science fiction and gothic horror. In May, this painting here was a particular challenge. As the yearly Dracula reread had started, I wanted to dive back into the book and my illustrations of those characters, but with a darker feel and more realistic rendering this time. And I'm using a different surface, a linen canvas mounted on panel for a rougher finish. I paint with acrylics, which have a famously quick drying time with very little room for blending. But I immediately noticed that this linen canvas, already primed, was incredibly forgiving when it comes to that. My color application felt smoother than on rougher cotton canvas I'd tried in the past, gesso panels, or my usual paper. And as the weave of the canvas is very fine, I still got to paint all the details I wanted. Overall, this felt like I was painting a portrait instead of illustrating a character, if that makes sense. I tried to paint more loosely with a rough underpainting that honestly looked so bad that I nearly gave up on it right then and there. For how many portraits I sketch, making that jump to paint and finished, fully rendered ones still always is a challenge. I have so much left to learn, and maybe that's another reason I love these slower, more elaborate paintings. They teach me new things every single time I sit down at my desk, but also give me time to then problem solve, to really dig into an idea, instead of the more fleeting trial and error of sketches. Here I struggled with the lighting. I had imagined a creepy red light invading the scene as our protagonist, Jonathan Harker, has his business trip turning into a horror story. So there are two sides to this portrait. A red light, exaggerated horror side, in which the eye even is opened wider, and a calmer side with more detailed, softer rendering and a cool light. You can see how subtle the canvas texture actually is. If I were using a more rough cotton canvas, the one that I can more easily get here in Korea especially, I'd have to work at a much larger size to have that texture disappear into the portrait. For someone who likes to work quite small, this has been amazing. So funnily enough, the left side of his face is more finished than the right side, which is the one hit by this creepy red light. So just a quick love letter to this particular canvas. I used a lot of burnt umber for this painting, hoping to give it an old-fashioned portrait look with that classic pigment. But my true hero of this painting is the smalt hue, a favorite shade of mine by Golden. It's a soft, transparent lavender blue color, and I found it perfect for cooling down mixes without overpowering them. I used a lot of this mixed with burnt umber, burnt sienna, titanium white and some yellow ochre. I call it the moonlight color, as I always reach for it for that magical, kind of cool lighting. So if I had to set priorities, this would be one of them. Illustrations, portraits, finished paintings, often with a lot of preparation going into them and each of them a bit of a challenge to complete. I like it when they turn into series around a single theme, like the Dracula ones or my Luthien pieces, for example. That and the sketching, no matter if random portraits or outdoor scenes or coffee cups, balance each other nicely, don't you think? On the other side of the face, well, that's where I really struggled. I find it very difficult to mix bright reds that don't turn salmon pink or just orange. So I tried a variety of different mixes and it took me a while to get anywhere with it. In the end, I'm glad I stuck with it though. Painting always calms me down and nothing gives me more fulfillment than completing a piece I wouldn't have been able to paint a few months ago. So while I struggled with this one, and it's far from perfect, there are certain areas I love. The eye hit by cool, soft light, the letters and diary entries in the background, and some of those red light effects that I think turned out nice. I'm excited to continue this series to give myself this opportunity to learn more about portraiture and grow as I go from character to character. Mina is up next and I'll be posting my work in progress pictures over on Patreon as well. How was your spring? Are you ready for summer heat and, in Korea's case, the summer rainy season? I plan to stay mostly indoors with fewer events and markets to distract me, so I can return to focusing on art making instead of art selling. Maybe I'll always have to go through phases like this as priorities shift and opportunities come up. And it's best to just go with the flow and then occasionally reflect and adjust. But even just deciding on these priorities in my own mind and setting goals for the coming months helps me feel more grounded and less scatterbrained. Now that we are in June, nearing the halfway point of the year, it is a great time to look both back and ahead. See what we've created already and what we want to do more of in the future. Do you have any plans? What are your priorities? I hope we can all find a better balance there and enjoy creative time spent on ideas that we feel deeply connected to. By the way, with Dracula Daily in full swing, I've been packaging and shipping more of my Dracula art scenes, and most of my original print bundles, like the tarot cards or some of the stickers, are now sold out. I want to create new bundle options as I go along and recently updated my shop with some of those. As I continue my Dracula character portraits, I hope I can turn those into a cohesive set as well. It feels good to be back to this project I loved so much, with a new twist and new challenges, but also a comforting familiarity. A slightly awkward third wheel to that pair of priorities are my Jeju specific, or maybe Korea specific, art. That takes different shapes and forms, from landscapes to Korean mythology to my cat guides. They're all specifically for these local events that I attend, for book fairs and art markets. In the past, when I worked nearly completely freelance as a storyboard artist for mostly foreign companies, that left me with a feeling of disconnect to the local community. So while I bring some of my fantasy art and Dracula scenes to larger art markets, I like having that connective piece of Jeju illustrations, and I would never want to give that up, even if they change forms again over the years. Looking at my priorities, maybe it makes more sense to let these Jeju and Korea projects be a part of my two main priorities, the sketchbooks and fantasy illustrations, instead of a third completely separate thing. I'll have to do more thinking about that. I have a few more Patreon letters to write, so everything will go to the post office tomorrow, and I really hope the one employee that knows how to handle international mail is there. I do have quite a few orders from Etsy and my web shop to send out, as well as the airmail packages for Patreon. These I ship every 2 months, kind of as a way to make sure that shipping isn't more expensive than the print. So the ones going out tomorrow for May also contain all the rewards from April. And there are actually 3 prints, despite it only being 2 months, because I couldn't resist making both a mermaid and a new Dracula inspired illustration art print. And then there's Lufian from April, which I'm really happy that she's now getting sent out, and there's a bookmark and a sticker to go with that. So I have a few of these, a whole bunch of snail mail, and then my actual shop orders, so I'll probably be at the post office for a while. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in my next art video.